little dark up here, so I'm going to put my glasses on for a second. So before I jump into the slides, a practical tip, a non-legal tip. If you're going back to Vienna, do not have the Wiener Schnitzel at the Holiday Inn. I got food poisoning Tuesday, was in bed Wednesday. Here I am, thrilled to be here. If I'm a little off, I'm blaming the Wiener Schnitzel and Holiday Inn, so don't go there. A few other technical things. I am not an economist or a trade expert. I'm an immigration expert, a US-based one. I did take a really good macro class in 11th grade at Stuyvesant High School. I think I learned a lot, but I think I also forgot everything probably the day after, except maybe supply and demand. So don't come in here expecting some grand economic theory because I can't report that. But what I did do was I did some extensive research, and every slide that we have up, and probably in the back you're not going to see them very well, but I was told that you guys will get the documents after so that you can look at it. We have the sources of the information, so I'm not making this up. I'm also not a trade expert. I do work with trade people, but I wanted to try to get an idea based on the invitation of you guys, thank you very much, of how, in my opinion, and I'm not objective at all in this case, because my job is to help people legally immigrate. I want to make it clear that I'm talking about legal immigration here. So these numbers and what I'm talking about does not include illegal immigration. It also doesn't include refugees, because refugee numbers are skewed by specific governments. Nobody knows how many refugees are actually coming in and out of each country. And the last caveat that I wanted to point out, which is important here in this specific audience, is because we have almost all EU members here. When you look at these numbers, you're probably going to compare what's happening in your specific country to maybe what I'm showing later on in the US. And the important thing to keep in mind is that the immigration policies that could be comparable to the US are the ones that have to do with non-EU nationals. These numbers do not take into consideration movement within the EU and immigration within the EU. If you're going to compare, you really want to look at your specific country and how many nationals are coming in from non-EU countries and what those policies are, if there's an increase or a decrease, and how that might affect the economy and trade in general. Why am I not objective? Now, some of you already know this, but the reason I'm not objective is because I was a legal immigrant to the US. But I have a strange story. I was born in Argentina, and my mom was a US citizen born in New York. But because she did not live at least 1 year as an adult in the United States, when I was born in Argentina, she couldn't get a passport for me. And so when she moved me to the US, I had to go through a 9-year process to become a US citizen. And so I understand what my clients feel, I understand how difficult it is. And as you'll see, with the administration we currently have, it's infinitely more difficult. I also relate to a lot of you because my mother's family was from Hungary, and my father's family was from Argentina, Cuba, Spain, and Italy. My last name is Italian, so that's why I do what I do. And I think that's important because when we want to do things well as lawyers, we have to be passionate about what we do, and that's the driving force for me. So let's jump in and talk about what's happening with global immigration first. So I don't know if you guys see these numbers or not, but global immigration is on the rise. Obviously, world populations are also growing, but these numbers that you see have to do with people who are permanent residents in other countries, not their home country, where they were born, but in other countries. So those numbers have gone up in 9 years, approximately 51 million worldwide, meaning there are a lot more people that are leaving their home countries and becoming permanent residents. Once they become citizens of those countries, they no longer pertain to this. So obviously there's a lot more than these. Europe right now is number 1 with 82 million, and North America, which is the US, Mexico, and Canada are second. What are some of the positive effects of legal immigration on national economies? So this is talking about national economies in the perspective of, in your case, a lot of your cases, not including the analysis of EU, but the effect that immigrants from other countries have. And there's a direct impact because what we see is that it increases demand for imports and exports, and I'll go into all these a little bit more. It increases the international competitiveness of the host nation, increases investment into the country, and that my work is largely based on investment-based visas, so this is what I see in my everyday work. And then there's an increase in the supply of highly skilled labor, which makes employers more efficient and able to compete globally. That also allows them to trickle down and create more jobs for lower level employees. These are numbers from the United Nations. I cannot tell you what all these mean specifically, but the most important thing is to look at the blue graph, or the blue line at the end, which shows that trade is on the uptick. You'll see it at a 45-degree angle. This is in the past 2 years. Obviously, there are recessions. Every country has its own internal dynamics. But essentially, in the last 10 years, trade has gone up significantly. If you're not an expert in numbers, but if you look at 26 versus 31, that's a very healthy growth worldwide. And my theory, although it's not one that's provable per se, is that there is a direct correlation between the rise of legal immigration worldwide and global trade. Another couple of positive impacts that I want to talk about, and these are ones that are talked about by experts in these published papers, but I also see it in my everyday work, is that if you increase legal immigration, you're increasing the number of high-skilled immigrants. We had the people from Slovakia here talking about education and how important that was, right? And the number of students that are university graduates going from 17% to 25%. It's more. They talked about the investment in innovation, and that there are 150 companies that they're investing into, that they've targeted, that they see as potentially growing the country and the economy. And they talked about the importance of increasing the number of people who were in the STEM fields. I think they said it was something like 1/3 of the 25% are in the STEM fields. These are essentially the targets for the most successful countries who can draw their success from legal immigration. In other words, targeted legal immigration, meaning trying to get as much intellectual capital into the country as possible. One example, and I don't have a slide about it, is Germany, who obviously there's a lot of, and I don't want to get too controversial here, and we can open things up at the end, but there's mixed feelings, let's say, that I get from my German clients, especially when it comes to the refugees. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the fact that in lockstep with the Trump administration, which is diminishing the amount of visas that are given to people with university degrees, specifically STEM, Germany has essentially gotten rid of those caps, meaning they're bringing in as many non-EU skilled labor as possible with degrees, especially in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And that really has helped increase their GDP and improve their economy. That's one example here in Europe that I think is a good one too. The byproduct of increased innovation is the need for more low-skilled labor. So what we do in my firm is a lot of what are called investment-based visas, which allow people to do brand new startups or to expand their businesses to the US. And what we've seen is for what's called an E2 visa, which I'll talk about a little bit, is that in the first 5 years that companies exist, they create an average of 7 to 10 American jobs. And generally people coming in are managers or executives, and they're creating lower level jobs for people who are not skilled enough, perhaps, to get jobs elsewhere. And so it's a trickle-down effect. It's a very positive one for the economy. It also leads to driving down prices, and the market becomes more competitive. Why? And I see this every day. I live in a place called Queens in New York City, where 1.1 million of the 2 million people that live there are foreign-born, and another third of those remaining 900,000 residents are first or second generation Americans. More than 50% of businesses in New York City are owned by immigrants and run by immigrants, and all those businesses create jobs. So a lot of those also are trade related. I don't know if you've seen this in the countries where you live, where someone comes, let's say somebody comes from Pakistan, and they decide to set up a company that trades goods to and from their home country. What does that do? That increases trade bilaterally between their home country and the country where they now reside. And that's something that happens every day in New York City and in my practice. So that's what I want to get across here, is that the illegal immigrants are investors. A lot of times immigrants, at least the family-based ones in the United States, they don't necessarily come with a job. They come through a family member. And so they're maybe not equipped to get sponsored by a company or to get employed by a US company. So what do? They innovate and they create their own companies. which helps the economy. And what does that do? And this is probably very perfunctory for some of you, but a lot of them are homeowners. A lot of them buy homes. Obviously, immigrant families in the U.S. tend to be almost 50% bigger than